An ordinary checkup would turn into an incredibly life-changing revelation that forced Norah O'Donnell to confront an unsettling reality. What was discovered underneath the surface would surprise her, but be a devastating warning to millions. This is the story that nobody was expecting until Norah O'Donnell is crying and confesses about her life-threatening diagnosis. The face of journalism was flashed across the screens of TV news sites, along with social platforms, capturing many people's attention. This time, the headline was not about an issue with the government, but rather a foreign country. Crisis or breaking news story? It was about her tragic news for O'Donnell over the years. Norah O'Donnell was an icon of excellence in journalism, reporting on news that was hard-hitting with unwavering confidence. Whether she interviewed world leaders reporting from war zones or delving into complicated issues for the general public, she was always regarded as a pillar of strength. Thanks to her signature poise and shrewd mind, she was regarded among the best reliable voice of the American media. Her journey into journalism was fueled by an insatiable drive to find the truth. Born in a military home, her upbringing was one of discipline and a profound appreciation for integrity. These traits will later define her career. She excelled at school and attended Georgetown University and quickly distinguished herself in reporting on politics in the world of distrust. And the media was often questioned. O'Donnell was an unstoppable source of the truth, with clarity and accuracy. Her rise into the ranks of journalism was anything but extraordinary. She was a well-known face in American families that covered the most significant historical moments, including presidents, wars, crisis in the economy, and national catastrophes. She witnessed the world shift in real time, often sitting in the forefront of history. From the battlefields in Afghanistan to the hallways that lead to the White House, she had navigated the most difficult terrains, bringing stories to life using her unique profundity and insight, yet no amount of experiences could prepare her for the shock she was about to receive, for the years she was about to receive. Had been the one to tell stories of resiliency in medical advancements and the power of human will, but now she was in the middle of the most intense pressures behind the camera that captivated millions of viewers. O'Donnell was the epitome of calm confidence and focus in her reporting of the most crucial news stories of the decade. As anchor on CBS Evening News, she had earned a reputation for her journalistic excellence. She was a respected source in a time where truth was often elusive. However, what people could see on their television screens was simply the other side of her story, hidden behind the camera, away from her polished studio and glowing studio lights. The tension was constant every morning. Began well before sunrise. By the moment the city was covered in darkness, Norah was awake and sifting through reports, memos, and briefs. She carefully sifted through breaking news and cross-referencing sources to ensure that each word she said on the air was supported by undisputed facts. Her job wasn't just about reading a teleprompter, but was about gaining an understanding, examining and reevaluating her work schedule. By mid-morning, she was in a series of meetings, strategizing the coverage, refining the scripts, and coordinating with field reporters who were stationed across the world. In a highly stakes business where every second can mean the difference between a leading position in the news cycle or being left behind, each second counted. Her team depended on her determination, and the trust she earned came the burden of production meetings turned into editorial discussions. Reporters submitted their latest news information, and Norah was to assess the continual streaming of feeds as well as recorded segments. Even the smallest of small of changes, an unreliable statistic or a faulty source, an unanticipated global crisis could throw an entire show into a last-minute chaos. However, the pressure did not end once the cameras stopped rolling. As among the top famous women in broadcast journalism, Norah was constantly under scrutiny. Every word she spoke was scrutinized. A single erroneous phrase could spark controversy. Her wardrobe choices were the subject of headlines. Was she wearing a dress that was too casual? Did she seem at ease enough? Yet, still retaining authority, the standards that were imposed upon her were harsh, and there was no chance of making mistakes in a business that was dominated by rapid-paced decisions and high expectations from the public. There was no switch to turn off until even the evening news wrapped her work wasn't over. She prepared for the day's news coverage, called late at night to sources, and stayed watch on what was happening. Stories. The world was always moving, nor did she. At some point, she was slipping away from herself. Didn't realize how long since her last health checkup. At first it seemed like a minor issue considering she was, and more than fine. She followed strict routines of exercise and ate a balanced diet. She was able to cope with stress and to survive amid the chaos. But the human body was not without limitations, even one that was as well conditioned as mine. I went for these annual skin checks. I'd gone for a checkup 2 years earlier to see my dermatologist, Dr. Elizabeth Hale. She later mentioned that when I had examined a few things and all was fine for 2 years, the years went by until she realized that she was due for a health checkup. The symptoms were there, subtle but persistent. A dull heesh that lasted longer than normal moments of fatigue that she shrugged off as part of her work. A slight loss of concentration. Nothing too serious, only the type of mental fatigue that any person who was in her position would feel. However, she persevered since stopping was not an alternative, but what she didn't realize is that the body was trying to tell her about it all along, and she was soon to be confronted with the truth. She was unable to be apathetic about the woman who was behind the headlines. Norah Odin is a name synonymous with sharp journalism, breaking news, and an unwavering dedication to truth. As anchor on CBS Evening News, she has reported for years on the most important stories in the world, including political turmoil and global crisis. But beneath the polished newscasts and well-organized reports is the personal story of a woman who was not born in the bright light in the newsroom, but in the warm embrace of a Texas childhood. Long before she was the household name, Norah was a simple girl who had big dreams. Growing up in San Antonio, Texas, she was raised in a tight-knit military family, which instilled her a strong sense of discipline and an unshakable commitment to work. Her father, who was a career military officer, often took the family from one location to another. She was exposed to different perspectives and experiences. These would later influence her career in journalism, however. San Antonio was home, a location where her dream was able to be realized from a young age. Was a go-getter, whether academics, athletics, or other extracurricular activities, Norah always worked hard to achieve her goals. She wasn't just an A student, she was also a track athlete, a cheerleader, and an active competitor in debate contests. Her confidence was apparent and her motivation unstoppable. She had a hunger for knowledge and an innate fascination with the world that later made her a remarkable journalist. However, like a lot of teenagers in the 1980s and 1990s, there are an aspect she did not have to worry about. Sun exposure. Growing in Texas, in a state where the sun shined all year long, she spent many afternoons outdoors in the pool, and just enjoying the golden warmth of sunscreen wasn't always an essential item. It was a secondary consideration, if not, it was even a thought at the time. Society considered tan skin to be an indication for a person's age. Health, Beauty, and Vitality magazines celebrated the bronzed skin and tanning beds as it were a fashion statement, as did many of her peers. Norah was a victim of the trend, often spending all day on the sun's rays without thinking about the future. The consequences when she grew older and her focus was shifting to journalism. It became her main focus, and with it, an unstoppable determination to be successful. She pursued her studies through Georgetown University, in which she earned an undergraduate degree in arts in philosophy. She later received a master's in liberal studies. It was while at Georgetown that she sharpened her communication skills, learning about international politics, relations, and the constantly changing media landscape. Her career took off swiftly. She landed her first big job as an actor's staff writer for Roll Call, who covered Congress, and gaining a better understanding of the nuances of reporting on politics. From there, she gradually rose up the ranks, proving her value as a journalist who didn't hesitate to confront tough questions or delve into the truth. She covered the presidential campaigns, global conflicts, as well as some of the important events in our history. Her determination and skill helped her get into NBC News, where she became a White House correspondent, and later to CBS News, where she solidified her status for being one of the best admired journalists in the world. Experienced an unsettling feeling of helplessness and vulnerability sank into her everyday life and filled the gaps between her usual self-conscience, along with the huge fear was ingrained in her head. She was unable to rely on the thing that always anchored the exercise routine. It was more than a routine. It was her escape, Therapy was her way to channel stress into productive action. She was in a solitary place to a bed, aching not only from the procedure but also from the imposed stillness that the 6-week recovery period stretched out before her, as if she were in the day that felt like it was more like the previous one. Being able to work out for 6 weeks was among the most difficult things. She admitted that she was devastated. It also led me to realize how important exercise can be beneficial for mental health. I was, to earth, over the diagnosis. Not being physically fit was a major influence on my mood. The anger built up within her, and she was desperate to go on and challenge the limitations imposed upon her, but the body would allow it, and losing control over her own body strength in her own routine was nearly too much for her to handle. Then was the exhaustion, not only physically but also mentally impact of her diagnosis, uncertainness of the future, and the constant reminders that she wasn't truly invincible. It all fell on her with a force that was invisible. Depression crept into her life without warning. Razor-sharp edges of her typical determination slowed down under the pressure of her thoughts. What did this mean for her life in the future? Could she ever feel like herself again? Her job added another layer of the storm that was brewing within her. She has always been a winner under pressure. However, this was a different experience from the expectations and demands were putting them to sleep, and even the small tasks that drained her of energy. She had spent her entire life being a person who was defined through her capacity to conquer any challenge, but for the first time, she was compelled to stop and be still. In that moment, she realized something that was unsettling. Did not have control anymore. Life was transforming quickly, and she was forced to choose other than to confront it. Melanoma, that is in its early stages, is often ignored since it could appear as a harmless mole or minor discoloration. American Academy of Dermatology underscores the importance of detecting early, with survival rates of up to 100% when melanoma is discovered in its early stages, but delays in diagnosis dramatically reduce the chances of being diagnosed. Norah, the consequences were immediate. She'd been reporting for years on advances in medicine and covering stories about health emergencies and stressing the importance of prompt treatment. Now, she was experiencing for the first time the reality she'd been discussing in news reports. This was not just a reportage, it was her reality. What came next was a significant decision-making process that highlighted the importance of warnings about skin cancer and significance of prompt medical intervention. O'Donnell discusses Norah O'Donnell's diagnosis of cancer was not an open secret. The public was aware of her campaign for early detection and her unrelenting determination to raise awareness of skin cancer. But when she was diagnosed with skin cancer, it was seated in front of the camera. With tears welling up in her eyes, she spoke of the truth that nobody had realized before. This was not just a fight against cancer, it was an ongoing battle against time. For months, she thought she was healthy and clear. Treatment was adversity but effective. The edges of the melanoma removed were clear. Regular scans had not revealed any signs of a recurrence. Every checkup confirmed the notion that she was caught earlier and beat it, but that was not the complete story, she stated in an interview. Norah O'Donnell breaks in tears and reveals about her dreadful diagnosis. Thought I was winning, I believed I did everything right, but her skin cancer was initially believed to be limited to a small area expanded beyond the surface of what was initially a single lesion that could be treated, had left tiny traces of cells that were too small to be detected initially, but potentially dangerous enough to grow below the surface. The word struck hard, the most eerie irony for the journalist who had been covering developments in medicine, and even someone who, with access to the top doctors, she was unable to overcome the unpredictability of cancer. What made her story so harrowing was the way it had progressed so quietly. There were no signs or fatigue, and there was or pain. Her voice was sluggish as she spoke of the painful treatment time of the infusions, with the debilitating side effects and the uncertainty about whether the treatment would be successful. She remembers the moment when she realized that her battle wasn't solely about her. She had been a professional for years, demanding an answer from other people, but however she was due to her family members and the millions who accompanied her path to speak the truth, regardless of how hard it was to tell the truth was. She spoke with her voice never ending, "Not for any one of us." Norah O'Donnell's honesty and rawness was in a stark reminder that regardless of how well prepared you are, Life will keep making you test yourself in ways you've never imagined. And that was the moment she spoke.